My name is Priya Balakrishnan, and I'm with Splunk. I'm responsible for the product marketing of the IT operations solutions, including the virtualization technologies and storage and operating systems and all of the good stuff. So in today's webinar, Paul and I will be co-presenting. In the first part of the webinar, we will be talking about Splunk itself, and Paul will then dive into a demo of the Splunk solution for you. But before I do get started, what I do want to introduce you to is some of the challenges, customers are typically facing, right? If we drill down into the priorities of a CIO, who sits essentially at the very top of, the organization, we see that, they're focusing on some of the key initiatives. And according to a survey by Gartner that was put out in 2012, the top priorities for CIOs include increasing the enterprise growth, delivering on business solutions, achieving and analytics and business intelligence, and essentially improving the customer experience. But the biggest problem that they have is that they have to do all of this while cutting costs and eliminating tools. The CIOs are under a lot of pressure to essentially deliver these priorities, and they still have to deal with, all of the challenges around the day-to-day operations, right? They need to be able to keep the lights on and the business running. They need to make sure that, they're able to support their organization to ensure that not only are the top priorities met, but also be able to, provide tools and information so that they can troubleshoot issues properly, analyze their data properly so that, it can tie to strategic business initiatives and make business decisions, and essentially be proactive about their environment, not only from a troubleshooting and analytics perspective, but also from the perspective of making sure that these top four priorities are met, right? The challenge is that there is so much complexity in the environment today. This increasing complexity with so many, interconnected technologies and layers of IT software and individual silos actually presents a tremendous amount of problem, because now you have tools that cater to, say, the virtualization layer. You have tools that cater to the storage layer, or you have tools that, APM tools that provide you visibility into your application stack or end user experience. But when it comes to diagnosing a problem, now you have these individual teams that are actually having to look at their individual technology stacks, right? This complexity is increasingly hard to manage, because now what is happening is that, there are siloed technologies. All of these solutions are disconnected or, outdated, because if you look at, how the trend has been in the last few years, for instance, virtualization and big data are some of the biggest trends that are there in the market. But if you use traditional tools that are out there to manage these these environments, you're kind of making decisions in a silo, or you're kind of making decisions in a vacuum, because these technologies, or the traditional technologies, are not equipped to handle the dynamic nature of these environments, right? The other piece is that if you want to actually connect these tools together, the challenge is that now you're actually going to have to have extreme customizations on your tools. If you want insights into your application layer, then you need insights into specific technology stacks, which either requires very intrusive ways of actually collecting the data and probing into that specific technology stack, or actually getting very high level visibility that really doesn't provide you the insights that you're looking for. Right? For example, applications may be written in Java or Python and maybe running in virtual machines, and your Java management technology is probably not written well enough to extend to the virtualization piece, and the virtualization piece is connected to storage and network layers and servers. So you need that cross visibility across these various tiers. And right now, all of the solutions are so disconnected that if you want to deal with a particular problem, you're really spending so much time on identifying root cause analysis simply because you don't have a way to holistically look at that data, right? When I was, in support a long time back, we had this problem that you're essentially seeing on the slide, right? We would have a problem, and the service desk will be called. then the service desk will look at some high-level data. They would say, oh, my tool is showing green, and I don't want to, I don't think there's anything problem, but somebody's calling about a user experience issue, and they essentially then escalate the issue to an application support team. The application support team does not really know what to do. They escalate it to the application developer team. Then it goes on to the systems administrator, right? Eventually, it comes down to, either the applications team looking at the data or the IT operations teams looking at the data. And like I was saying, when I was a support engineer, what I would have is I was in the application support team. I would essentially have my Perl scripts, right, that would extract information from the logs, and then I will look for keywords in the log like failed or error, and then determine the appropriate timestamp and see if it had any associated impact to the user that was actually calling in about a particular problem, right? Now, assuming that there's a particular problem in that application stack, now at that point in time, I didn't have visibility into, okay, which part of the various IT tiers actually contributed to that problem, right? So now then I essentially have like 30 people on the call for 8 hours, everybody looking at their individual siloed tools saying, oh, my tool is saying that this is okay, or my tool is saying that this is okay. The biggest challenge is that the tools are showing green. There are tons of people sitting on a call actually trying to diagnose a problem simply because there is no holistic visibility across the various IT stacks, right from the end user experience to the application to the web layer, the infrastructure that supports these applications, to the back-end pieces like the databases, or even like your infrastructure could be like in the cloud environment. So you have even limited visibility, like say if you're hosting applications in AWS, right? The challenge you're facing is that your infrastructure is becoming extremely complex, and troubleshooting becomes incredibly hard, right? So think about it, right? I mean, you have so much data within your organization. I mean, every part of your infrastructure is generating so much data within your organization. The biggest challenge is how do you make sense of the data, right? You have data that's coming in from your logs, from your configuration files, from user click streams, and all of the good stuff. But then now when you want to diagnose a problem, like I said, I mean, I write my Perl scripts to extract the data, but then there are ways to actually interconnect that data across these various tiers, right? From your order processing to the middleware to web server, there may be these common IDs that could actually, make sense to that data, right? Take, for example, this, purchasing a product on, say, your tablet or your smartphone. If the purchase transaction fails, you can call the call center and then you tweet about the experience. Or you say, oh, you know what, you call the call center and you essentially say, I had this particular problem. Now, there are various pieces within your infrastructure that actually can connect the data across these various stacks and collect that information, right? And make sense of that data. But right now, you don't have an easy and automated way to do this, right? For instance, if you look at this example, we have a single customer ID associated with the order ID, and there and if you look at it from the order processing and the middleware and the web server perspective, you have the customer ID or the product ID, across these various pieces of logs. Additionally, in the middleware layer, you have information that's saying, oh, there was connection refused in the middleware layer, in the web server layer, or in the database layer. Now, your challenge is trying to figure out the connectedness across these various pieces of software, right? So now what if, you had an easy way to actually search through the data, through this morass of information that's actually generated, across your various infrastructure pieces, right? What if there was an easy way to access the data to determine, what parts of the product or the user, what parts of the product did the user actually traverse through, and what kind of experience did he have across these various pieces? Right? What if there was a way to actually record the behavior and use it not only from a troubleshooting perspective, but also from an analytics perspective, right? To say, whoa, okay, these were the pieces of the product or the software that, I frequently see users are constantly accessing. And so maybe that's what I need to kind of focus on from, a next feature product perspective, right? What if there was a way to kind of get that end-to-end visibility across these various technology tiers and consolidate all your monitoring solutions into a single place so that you can get this comprehensive visibility and essentially gain this, this useful means to actually make sense out of the data, right? I mean, if you look at a lot of look at the trend out there. I mean, there's this big hue and talk about Hadoop, right? What is Hadoop? Hadoop is an easy batch processing way to actually collect all of that, data within your organization and store it somewhere successfully. The biggest challenge is then what do you do with that data, right? I mean, and that's where a big data solution, a big data analytics solution actually, makes sense, right? I mean, because this data, as you just saw in the previous example, can provide you tremendous amounts of insights, right? And that's where Splunk comes into play. What is Splunk, right? Splunk is essentially a tool that provides you the ability to transform your data, right? Essentially your logs, your config files, your user click streams and all of that into, useful dashboards and reports, right? It provides you the means to actually look through your data and gain intelligence out of the data. It provides you real-time visibility and correlates data across multiple technology tiers. And as Paul will show in his demonstration today, you will be actually able to determine how, Splunk, one, provides you the ability to collect data from any part of your organization successfully. Two, proactively use it for proactive monitoring. But not only that, it provides you the ability to use that data for analytics and intelligence, right? It essentially enables you to gain real-time insights and also, trend on your raw data, on the underlying data to actually make sense of that data, right? So what can Splunk do, right? Splunk essentially, think of it as, a real-time platform for your machine data. So what is machine data, right? Machine data is any data that's within your organization. It can come from customer-facing data to Windows operating system registry events, from virtualization events, application events, databases, any of that, right? So just to give you some background on how the word Splunk actually got formed, it's an abstraction of the word spelunking, right? Spelunking is exploring underground caves, right? The abstraction to this is you're exploring your underlying data, IT data, right? And this data, because Splunk only requires the data to be in some kind of a flat file format, any data can be essentially ingested and indexed within Splunk, right? And that is what Splunk provides you the flexibility to do. Collect all of this data across your entire environment without any upfront schema. What do I mean by that? In that we do not have a database in the back end, and therefore you're not in any form or fashion required to actually pre-normalize the data to fit into specific schemas, right? We do not have any custom costly connectors. So because Splunk only requires the data to be in some kind of a flat file format, you do not need intrusive collectors to actually collect data from your environment. Think of it pretty much like a tail in your log file, right? I mean, if you're familiar with Unix commands, if you're collecting logs as an example, what it's essentially doing is kind of, syslogging that data. You can use syslog or TCP or RDP to collect that data, but it's so non-intrusive in that it's like a tail in your log file, and essentially you're, forwarding that data onto the Splunk indexers to index it. Splunk has its own custom MapReduce technology, much similar to how Google works, and, very similar to Google, right? We have a very simple, search engine which allows you to actually search through this, insane amounts of huge volumes of data very easily, and Paul will actually demonstrate that in his demo today, right? So what does Splunk actually allow you to do, right? Splunk enables the connected data center. What do I mean by that, right? It allows you to do ad hoc searching, right? Like I said, I mean, it gives you a very simple search bar. Once the data is in Splunk, you will see that the foundation for creating alerts, for creating reports, for creating dashboard views, everything is Splunk, is the search, right? And then once you do that, what we notice is that customers, say, oh, you know what? I was able to figure out that there was a problem that I wasn't even aware of, right? Because you're just searching through all of that data within your organization. So they say, oh, let me go ahead and, index additional data either through apps that, Splunk has. Apps are basically skins on top of your data. What do I mean by that is that it gives you a framework to kind of collect data from specific technology tiers, because not every data is every technology may be in a flat file format. I can give you an example. If you take VMware as an example, if you're running VMware in your environment, you have data in your hypervisors, in your hosts, in your virtual machines, and now when you want to collect that data across these various environments, across these various pieces of your VMware infrastructure, it becomes really hard, right? So now what we also provide is a framework called an app, which will allow you to essentially collect the data from your VMware environment as an example, and essentially put it into Splunk. And then, index that data automatically and provide you useful visualizations right out of the box, right? So going back to the connectedness piece, right? I mean, once customers start searching and investigating, they go and say, oh, you know what? Let me index more data because maybe I have other pieces of my infrastructure that has alerts and problems that I'm not even aware of. So they start indexing more data and kind of start proactively monitoring it, because now you can easily and quickly set alerts on top of that data. Then once they do that, they realize, you know what, I can actually get insights into the data in the sense that they can get actionable dashboards or actionable reports and analyze that information. I can give you an example, right? I mean, one of our customers, Bosch, as an example, they had, they were supplying medical equipment to, to hospitals, right? But the hospitals were frequently complaining that, there was something wrong with these medical equipment because, they were frequently not providing the capabilities that was expected of those tools. Then Bosch started actually splunking the data from these medical equipments, and then they realized, as an example, that nurses were not fully charging the data, right? Our nurses were leaving the data in very random places, or leaving the equipment in very random places, right? Insights like that, I mean, it can be easily gained. As an example, another example I can give you, one that our CEO loves to give is, there's this building management company that was splunking in data from their elevators, right? And when they were splunking in data from their elevators, they actually used that data to kind of do an analysis to figure out, based on where the elevators are stopping, tenants were actually, going to move out and, essentially put, houses in the market. It's, there are very powerful ways in which you can actually report and analyze off of that data, because Splunk is very ad hoc in its reporting capability. So, from a maturity path perspective, I mean, that's how we typically see our customers grow. They start off with search and investigate into your data. Then once they start searching and investigating and really, figure out that, the power that Splunk brings to the table in terms of its search and investigate capabilities is phenomenal, that they start indexing more data either through our apps or through custom methodologies that they have implemented. And then once they do that, then they're actually able to get intelligence and business insights out of that data because of, the various reports and role-based views that you can give across the organization, right? The other piece is that Splunk is a platform for IT operational intelligence, right? So what do I mean by that, right? One of the things that our CEO hates for us, for us as a marketing team to do is use the word platform, and he essentially barred us from using it for a very long period of time, because unless the customers really call us a true platform, it's very hard for a vendor to tout that we're a platform. And in the last year or so, we've seen more and more customers use us and call us as a platform, which is why we're not talking about ourselves as a platform. When we first started, we were, a log management tool, right? Then we moved on to being an engine for machine data, and now in the last year, we've essentially become a platform, right? What do I mean by that is that, like I talked to you about that app framework, an app is essentially a means to actually collect data from specific technology tiers and provide a starting point for useful visualizations and dashboards, right? You can completely and easily customize these apps if they don't meet your needs, because Splunk is very ad hoc in its capabilities. But at the same time, I mean, sometimes you may not know what to do with your data, right? You may not know what you want to start looking at. So these apps kind of provide you a starting point, right? And then you can easily customize them. And we have over 320 apps right now, right? Uh, all of actually most of which are free. We have at this point in time only two apps that are paid for: our enterprise security app and our PCI compliance app, right? We have all of these apps for servers, for storage, for network, for operating systems, for mobile applications, for your cloud AWS infrastructures. But not only that, we're seeing more and more partners and other vendors that want to partner with us to create apps. For instance, we have solutions from ExtraHop or App Dynamics or Palo Alto Networks, right, that are actually creating Splunk apps, and they're kind of supporting these apps to say, you know what, we want to be able to Splunk that data so that there's a unified way to look at the data across these various technology tiers, right? So now with all of these apps indexing data within Splunk, you have that holistic visibility. But alternatively, you also have an API, very comprehensive API. So Splunk provides these very comprehensive APIs to actually export the data out of Splunk if you so desire, right? So you may have, executives within your organization which are very used to a specific way to look at the data, right? Or want to export it into a centralized internal portal. And it's easily possible to do that using the Splunk APIs, because we have very powerful SDKs that actually allow you to actually export the data with outside of Splunk as well, right? So we're not like saying, oh, you just need to, use Splunk for everything, although that would be wonderful. But, you can essentially, use it however you want. And this is what truly makes us a platform. And we truly believe that, we are, this is just the beginning. We're seeing more and more customers and partners wanting to partner with Splunk to essentially make Splunk the central platform for all machine data, right? So, the because Splunk is very ad hoc in its reporting capabilities, it can be used across various use cases, right? I mean, it can be, and it provides role-based access. So now you can, because you have all of the log data, one of the biggest challenges we hear from customers is that, oh, I don't want my development team or my help desk team to have access to my production environment, right? And you no longer have to do that. You can actually just have all of that data within Splunk and have them, provide them access to Splunk to look through the data. Not only that, you have the ability to, allow them to, see only specific portions of the data with role-based views, right? So now your help desk team can essentially, look at the data very quickly and easily, and your application support team can, look at the data from, a middleware layer perspective, or, at your infrastructure perspective. Your system administrator can, essentially look through the logs very quickly to kind of find out, or look through the data. I stand corrected in that it's not just logs. It can collect any kind of information that resides within your organization, and now your system administrator can look through firewall data, or can look through logs, or can look through config files and see that information. Additionally, we have tremendous insights into security, right? I mean, so for instance, we have customers that say, I want to find out, very simple, right? I want to find out, what versions, or what patches are running for specific technology tiers, across my entire environment, right? And it's as simple as doing a search across, the information that you've collected, and basically create a tabular list of that data and export it, right? And lastly, because you can provide very useful visualizations, and Paul will be demoing this very shortly, you can actually gain powerful insights from your data and drill down right from, the end user, right down to, the underlying infrastructure, and to the raw data easily within Splunk, right? At this point in time, I'm going to pass the control to Paul, and he's going to be running a demo.
Thank you, Priya. We do have a question. Lori has a question of, can Splunk proactively alert me on any problems?
Absolutely. So, like I said, the underlying, the foundation of Splunk is search, right? Once you figure out what to search or how to search for the data, sometimes you may realize that one of your monitoring tools has not, essentially alerted you of a particular situation, and now you can say, oh, you know what? I was able to figure it out with this particular search, and generalize that search and create an alert. And Paul can quickly, maybe show you that as well and see, it'll allow you to see how you can use that search to basically create reports, alerts, dashboard views, and role-based access through your data.
All right.
Thank you, Priya. Paul, you may begin.
Okay, thanks. That question is a really good question. I'm actually going to touch on that. So I want to come back into IT operations. I'm going to focus on an aspect of IT operations, which is all of the critical applications that you manage today that probably consume a large portion of your time. Now, I know that's a portion of IT operations, but we'll focus on that. And I want to kind of explain the environment we have. I'm going to come back to a use case we talked about at the very beginning around service desk gets a call, slow application performance, customers are complaining. How do we resolve that, and how Splunk plays an important part of that to getting to that quick time to resolution, what we call MTTR. So what I'm looking at here is the actual environment. I'm going to kind of explain some of this here of what we're collecting for data, and then I'm going to go into the core Splunk searching capability, and we'll come back to the app. We're representing a very common business application that is multi-tiered, multi-layered, different technologies. We see this all the time. You probably have several running through your mind today that you are looking and thinking, yep, that's my application environment. In this case, it's an Apache-based web tier with a MySQL database behind the scenes. They're running a middle tier that's processing all of these product orders. So we've taken an online store and represented that, but it could represent any of your applications. And we're representing this as running in physical hardware. What Priya's talked about a few minutes ago, I was just with her last week at a VM user conference. Splunk is also very, very good at Splunking your virtualized environment and reaching in and getting insights out of your applications running in those environments. So it can take the entire, big picture of everything and bring that data and make it usable. What it does here, we take the forwarders and we collect that data. This forwarder sits out on that source. It's very lightweight, universal forwarder, and two things it does: take the data, what is it, and send it up to the indexer, where we go ahead and put a time series stamp on that so we know when that event occurred, and now it's ready to search. It extracts out different fields that we can report on, and I'll see that in a few minutes. And then I'll be interfacing through what we call a search head. So let me go ahead and start with search, because that's where Splunk gets its power. It is a platform for search over your data. So we've laid this search capability over this data. And what I just want to do is just 60 minutes. What's come in the last 60 minutes? So you're going to see very quickly here, everything is showing as far as the events goes. And I get this really great flash timeline. I love this for troubleshooting issues. I'm using it in-house in our own environment, as well as when I'm on site with customers. I've done several POCs lately, and we're immediately finding value or the issues in their data. One of them was for response to a production go live, and in 1 day's time, we were on site for just a couple hours. We were already starting to point to the latency issue that they were having, but we were showing them other things that they didn't even know was going on in their data. A little more about that story in a few minutes. But first of all, I want to kind of point out here of what's in this data. Well, I know it's coming from 8 different hosts, so these are fields that Splunk automatically will extract and make available to me. I know that there are different sources of this data, so you're going to see that some of this is coming from, the database, some of it's coming from the Linux server, netstat, and so on. So I have some really valuable information of the sources, but I also go down here and I see what's going on within this data, including, let's just go ahead and look at product ID. Now, customers are interacting with this business application ordering products. And if I'm a product expert, and this is a good example where this is non-IT data that we're bringing in and supplementing through a database lookup, or simply just bringing in a CSV file on a batch every night, or there's different ways that data's out there, Splunk can get to it and bring it in and make it searchable and usable. But I don't know those product codes. And if I'm a product expert, I would at a glance know. Most of the time I have to go look in the catalog. Customers don't have to do that, or in this case, the analyst doesn't have to do it, because all we do is we add knowledge and we translate those product IDs into the specific products. I can quickly turn this into a visualization. So let's just take a look at top overall. So all I did was put in a search command here of top products. And let's say I have to give this to my manager. I'm going to go ahead and format this into a pie chart. And I can then simply save this into a dashboard. That's the other thing, being a developer for years on other platforms. I love how fast Splunk allows me to develop. So we'll just say, I'll just put a title on here. I'm going to put on a dashboard I've kind of been building out for a few minutes while we started the demo today. So I'll choose an existing dashboard that you'll see in a few minutes, order processing, and I'm looking at around performance health, and I don't want to know what they're ordering in the last 60 minutes. So I'm going to put some other things with it. We'll say a pie chart, but you get all kinds of other types of visuals that you can create, and I can even accelerate this search so it runs really fast, even faster than what we were seeing on the screen, because there's some ways that it keeps this information readily available in the search. Now, I'm going to come back to this issue, so I'll get back to this in a few minutes, but I'm going to just put in a search, a very common search, and that is, and I've saved part of this just to save a little bit of time, I've placed this here, and I'm going to search for all errors, failed, severe, and also in source type. So I'm narrowing my source type, and I want to look also not only what if it's calling a failed error or severe, but also the error codes. And it finds quite a few of them, more than I really want to know. Now, if you may recall, Priya talked about there's no database behind the scene. There's no schema. That means that we're actually able to call what we use schema on the fly. With schema on the fly, that allows me to go ahead and say, well, how do I want to present this data at this time? So all I have to simply do is come in here and I'll say, let's create a table. So with the table, we will go ahead and put in the fields that I want to include in my dashboard. And I'm going to say that I want the host, I want to know the file, I want to know the status, I want to know the status, URI, because I want to know what query is actually causing this on my system, and we'll just hit enter. So what we see here is the results of this in a table. Now this table I've defined in the search. I can turn around and make this available to someone. Let's say you do put it in a dashboard and a manager or another technician comes back and says, well, I'm missing these data elements. If this was a database, I'd have to go back to DBA and have to define all that. So no, I just simply go in and say, well, I need to know the method. Hit enter. There's the method. I'm going to add this into this dashboard real quick. Add it to the existing. We'll make this a table. I'm just going to accelerate this one real quick too. So the end result of this, what you're going to see, is a dashboard that I've added several things to. Two of these I pre-added before while we were going through the demo. So these are just total page access time, what's the total products. And oh, by the way, before I give this to my manager, I want to go ahead and just move current products up here. So they know what's going on, and I want to, and you can notice I can edit, I can move things around. I could take this link right now, send it to my manager or my IT staff and say, here you go. You know how many people are accessing the page, the application in the last 60 minutes, what's being accessed, and most importantly, what are we getting for errors and what is causing the error. I've just put some valuable insights of my production application at the fingertips of my team that they can start acting on these issues. And that's why I wanted to spend a few minutes with searching and show you how quickly you can turn information searches of your data across the vertical and the horizontal of your data center into powerful insights that now someone can look at a glance and say, I know who I need to contact, or I know how to resolve this issue. Customers using Splunk today, on average, around 50 to 70% reduction in MTTR. The reason for that is because we spend so much time in the meantime to know, okay, I know what, but why did this happen? How do I quickly resolve it? So let's go the other perspective on this. Let's go back to application management. And I want to start with from an IT operation. So now you understand what's behind all of these dashboards. Every single one of these visuals is an active search running on this environment looking at my data, and it's looking at multiple sources. And this is a really good example. So let's take this application up a level and say for the IT manager that wants to know how is it performing? We've promised to the business this level of performance. Are we meeting that right now? Especially when an application is reaching outside to your customers beyond the main part of the business. So I know right now my SLAs, it's not looking good. And this is an SLA looking at transaction and throughput. I can use statistical commands. So the search language itself has 150 plus search commands. And very easy to learn, and also powerful beyond just your very basic searching, allowing you to do stats and transformations, and in this case, transactions. I can look at a transaction moving through, and I can say, well, an acceptable rate is this level of seconds, and in this case here, I'm infringing upon the SLA. I also can look at, well, what were failed transactions? These aren't too bad. We see some errors. You saw those a few minutes ago. This isn't really the concern. It's somewhere else. And I just got a call. They're saying my customers are complaining about it's taking a long time to submit an order. Why is it? So I want to resolve this quickly. Well, I know it's not a capacity issue because this is a summary of memory, CPU utilization, throughput. So it's 47, 45%. That's not an issue. I also see current, what's my 7-day average for transaction volume? So my transaction volume is not over what it normally is. We're actually looking pretty good. But it's the SLAs. It keeps bouncing above. So something's going on that's holding up these transactions. So how many are failed and successful? This looks fairly good. So what I want to do is actually, and this is a great thing with Splunk, I can make these dashboards fit the audience. So they don't have to go out and go to searching directly. They can quickly triage an issue in your critical production apps or IT operations, networking environment, all of these things that you would want to manage. I just simply click on a link I've added to that dashboard in the XML, and I'm on to the next layer of this. So now we're looking at the middle layer. So here's the database, the web server, the middle tier, and the database. Now, at a glance, we know it's right here, but I want to kind of walk through this. So 575 seconds, that's my transaction volume. It's all right. It's not what I would like. So where's the issue? So I start glancing here really quick. We do have some errors. Not the, I would obviously want these down to minimal or none, but it looks like these servers, and look how I go over this line here in this. I can look at performance of an isolated one. I could potentially click on any of these and drill down to them. So all of these are actionable, real-time data dashboards. Not, it was refreshed a day ago, 24 hours ago. These types of dashboards we see in other apps. They're your data. It's being searched on. I've worked a lot with Tomcat and Apache environments, and we know the JVM can be challenging. And in this case, memory utilization here, the heap size is looking good. So it is over here. I come over to the database, and we've brought in, you choose what you want to have. You can have a quick summary of what the metrics are, and we could have all of the different queues splunked out. We could have the error logs. So we just put a quick summary of what you potentially could do. And here we put the purchase queue for our example. Now, the purchase queue is way above where it should be. That's my known issue. So instead of having to call the, okay, slow performance, I'm going to call the web team. Let's escalate to the web team. Nope, it's not them. All right, let's get everyone on a call, SWAT call, and now we're going in towards midnight, and we're all on a call, and I'm telling, all right, you go over and check those logs while I go over and check here. And that's our typical SWAT call that takes hours of time to get to the resolution. Whereas, a tier 2 support person, maybe even tier 1, I can come here very quickly and know I need to route this ticket to the database team to look at, and potentially, because I've given them additional insights, I'll go down one more tier. I can look at, okay, so is it the database environment, the server? No. CPU looks good, memory looks good, but the queue is really high. Why is that? Well, here's another thing of adding very valuable data from IT operations that's outside of your normal, what we call log files, and that is your change in configuration data. Splunk is very good about taking in this data and mashing it up to where I can, at a glance, know what was the configuration values. Like here, they increased, they decreased, but here, this doesn't look right. So I know I need to go have a talk with Simon. I can tell the DBA saying, Simon's the one that caused this issue here. And also, was there a change ticket? It's a simple query into, in this case, remedy ticketing system, but whatever your ticketing system is, you have a change management environment, take and just basically match up on product, the server, the application, and be able to look and say, was there a change ticket? In this case, there isn't one. So we can go down to the raw data, and we'll actually look at the search, and we can, so next time this occurs, whenever there is no change ticket, I want to be able to go ahead and alert on that. So I'm just going to quickly, I'll just show you where this is at. I won't create the alert for sake of time because I have one more thing I want to show you, and that is if I wanted to alert on this, I could say, all right, this search, when it's issued, when do you want to schedule it? Well, I want to run it once every an hour looking for this. And, whoops, I'm going to go on to the next here, and I want to show you what can happen. I can send an email to an alias of an administration DBA team. I can run a script. I work with several different customers that are actually going and creating tickets in their ticketing system. And it's simply a script that kicks off a web service. However it integrates, we're able to go over and create that ticket. So now we have this monitoring. This is beyond your basic level monitoring because of the fact that this search is considering multiple source types. I have yet to find other monitoring tools that have this broad reach. And Splunk is really good. It can come along and complement your existing monitoring tools and fill those gaps you have. Or for other customers, they're retiring their legacy ones because they're great what engines. They can tell me what went bump in the night, but it doesn't tell me why. I know why right now. I know the why is this was an unauthorized change by this person on this server. So for the sake of time, but before I hand this back over, I want to come right back to search. There's another way we could have come at this investigation, and that is with the actual IP address. Let's say I do know the IP address of the server that's having the issue, and I could put in simply, what's the IP address? And this would be like a level 2 support person. So, I don't know, I see a spike here, 503 errors, not what I want. It's right around, they reported this issue right around this time window. And I can simply just go ahead and drill in. I'm just going to be looking at one event. I'm going to come all the way down to, I am sitting on, look on the timeline right there, 1 second. Now, all I see is one record. But all I have to do is simply come back, put a wildcard on it, and I look in that 1 second of time or 1 minute, however your time space is, I see not only that event, I'm looking at other source types. I bring in my other source types from the database, the combined logs, and there is my issue. This happened because SQL shut down, and we're seeing that it could not write to it, and there was an error writing to the file, and with this error caused this degradation in service because I had to use another queue. Now, this is further telling and expanding upon the what's going on, and the why was because we added in the configuration data. Splunk can take in configuration files. So I'm going to come over to another app called Splunk on Splunk. We can use Splunk to look at its own environment. A lot of customers use this, and it's a good example of how you can look at config files. I can simply pick all the config files out of Splunk, and I can compare two files. I can look at, on this server and on another server, and it's this type of interface it's easy to set up. It's in the XML. I just basically add my menus, my searches I want to reference, and I can start my configuration management team from an IT operations perspective has a valuable way of getting to that almost that closed loop change management, being able to look at configurations and changes as they occur, after they occur, and better manage those. So I kind of wanted to come in and just mention that for the sake of time to give you some additional insights on that. One last thing, and that is Splunk Base. Splunk is great about putting information at the fingertips of developers, users of Splunk. So the documentation is great. Take a look at that. There's getting started there. But I want to come over to Splunk Base. Splunk Base is a place that you can add apps to fill. Maybe I have my Linux servers or my Windows servers, and I need to go ahead and start bringing that data in. As Priya mentioned, it's a great starting point, and these apps are out here. You can download and in seconds have them in and start getting that data in. So with that, I want to go ahead and hand this back over to Priya. Hopefully this gave you an idea of what's possible with Splunk. And I'll hand it back to Priya. We'll wrap up and we'll go to a Q&A session at the end here. So Priya, go ahead and take it back. And if you have any questions from the demo, please go ahead and put those in the chat, and we'll go ahead and take those in the Q&A once we wrap up. Thanks.
It has been handed to you. Are you on mute? There we go.
Sorry, I was actually talking on mute. Sorry, thank you.
You're
Well,
welcome.
thanks. Thank you very much, Paul. I thought that was an awesome demo, and I was just saying, you could essentially see how ad hoc Splunk is in its capabilities, right? I mean, one, you start from search, then you move on to be, creating alerts and dashboard views and reports. But, you can also use it from analytics perspective because now you can persist that data for however long you want, right? I mean, you're essentially going to be able to, if you can throw cheap hardware at it, then you can cheap memory at it, you're essentially going to be able to store that data in its raw format and use it for planning and analytics. I mean, as an example, one of our customers essentially their Availity, a healthcare provider, has a mandate, a federal mandate, that they have to store log files about their customer interactions, so that if there's a claim 5 years down the line or so, they have the ability to go back in time, go back up to 5 years in time, and look through that information. And therefore, they're using Splunk to search through that data and essentially store that data for 5 years, right? And that's how ad hoc Splunk can be, and that's how you can use that raw data however you want. So essentially, to deliver that operational intelligence, you need three primary capabilities, right? One, you should have the ability to get real-time visibility of your data and correlate the transactions and events across these multiple IT sources and monitor them, proactively, and track them against SLAs and drill down into your data so that you can diagnose problems. The other piece is that you need powerful navigation capabilities so that you can actually get to that needle in the haystack, to be able to troubleshoot and identify the root cause very easily. And as you saw with Paul's demo, if you just enter simple terms like even error, and then you could keep piping the information or keep adding on to your search query to essentially get to that data very easily, right? And the last piece is to be able to analyze historically as well as live streaming data. You just saw, I mean, there was a report which allowed you to see historical trend versus your real-time trend, and basically identify patterns and basically prove if any kind of compliance issues, or identify security vulnerabilities, right? And so Splunk, with its core capabilities, can support these three main workloads, right? And it can actually provide you extreme operational intelligence across your environment, right? So we have a few customer case studies. I'm sorry. Before I go into the customer case studies, I do want to talk about our apps. Like we mentioned, our apps are skins on top of your data, and we have over 320 apps, only 2 of which are paid for. Everything else is free, and they're pretty much plug and play for various technology tiers. And they've been built by the community partners, by Splunk, by a whole bunch of folks that you can easily leverage, right? From a customer case study perspective, so as an example, Ping Identity, they're a technology company that essentially provides cloud identity security solutions, right? And they had very cumbersome processes, limited visibility through their environment to actually identify if they were compliant with SLAs, right? So some SLAs included things like where they had to recover from a failure within 30 minutes, right? And with things like that, I mean, they essentially, before Splunk, were looking at independent systems monitoring solutions and in siloed capabilities, and they were not able to really get that visibility of their SaaS service very easily, right? With Splunk, they were actually able to achieve, that much desired cross-IT tier visibility, and among the most important benefits, they were actually able to save time and effort. Simple tasks like log extraction from your hosts and VMs, for system-level insights, right, would take them 4 hours because they had to go to individual hosts or individual virtual machines and collect that data. With Splunk, this time was reduced by 70% and basically gained tremendous efficiencies. Splunk also helped them consolidate monitoring tools and scale very easily for centralized monitoring. If you look at Vodafone, right, I mean, They had a problem where their service desk could not, easily quickly respond to customer issues, and they were actually very struggling with, very time-intensive searches on exceptions or errors in their Java and J2E infrastructures, right? What they wanted the ability to do is provide their service desk the ability to quickly access the information and troubleshoot issues or escalate accordingly so that they could improve the customer satisfaction levels. And they were able to, deliver this rapid troubleshooting capabilities, with Splunk, right? Cisco is a big user of Splunk, right? I mean, they're a worldwide leader in networking, and their internal, one of their internal teams found too costly and time-consuming to, track security incidents across, their employee base, right? They were struggling with like dozens of consoles of like disparate devices and tools and security systems with no easy way to actually correlate the data across these various tiers, and they wanted a centralized way to look at that data. And with Splunk, they were able to, basically, proactively, assess threats, mitigate any issues in terms of like, incidents, and they were also able to analyze their security architecture and identify if, they had the appropriate, firewall rules in place and such, and detect incidents and actually proactively, manage the response as well, right? Why should you consider Splunk? Like I said, customers grow from, simple use. It's pretty much it can scale from desktop to, enterprise, and that it's it's a free download. You can quickly access it, and then identify specific use cases you want to target, and then grow over time. There's grow. You don't have to immediately buy a large volume of licenses to actually look through all of your data. You can very easily scale by based off of demand. We have over we have thousands of users of our free software, but we have 5,200 plus paying customers, in more than 90 countries, and more than half of the Fortune 100 are Splunk customers across various verticals, right? We're a growing company. We have, and we're a very transparent company. You will see our Splunk Base, Splunk questions, and Splunk user groups are very active, and customers and partners and Splunk folks usually participate very actively. But additionally, we also have our .conf in Vegas, the end of this, in September, end of September, where it's a very technical conference. It's not a sales conference. It's a very technical conference. We have enablements. We have customers presenting on how they've used Splunk to solve specific use cases and so on. So it's and in fact, it's mostly only for mostly we see existing customers attending there, right? So Splunk, it essentially enables, IT operational intelligence. It allows you to get, I like to call it an end-to-end platform for machine data. Machine data because it can collect any data from your environment. It's a platform because it can collect, it provides you the ability to easily extend into your existing monitoring framework. And it's end-to-end because it can connect the dots very easily across your environment to gain operational intelligence.
Thank you, Priya. We do have a question. Jose has a question about how long can I keep the data before it's aggregated within Splunk?
Um, I, I can take that. So, like I said, Splunk is essentially, it doesn't have a database in the backend. So, you don't have to even aggregate the data anytime soon, right? You can store it in its raw format if you so desire, but if you don't want to, we also have something called summary indexing, which can essentially, aggregate the data in a manner that you choose to do, right? So, it's really customizable, and it can scale very easily because, for instance, one of our largest customers indexes 100 terabytes of data a day, but that means he's searching off of, petabytes of data at rest, right? So it's not like you have to aggregate the data because you don't have you're constrained with the database, right? You can essentially put cheap memory and store it, but just because you're putting cheap memory and you're storing it doesn't mean that you're constrained in scale as well. You can easily report off of that data very easily within Splunk.
Thank you, Priya. The next question is what is the impact on my production environment when I use Splunk for data collections?
Great. So that's a very frequently asked question. So the impact is actually extremely minimal. I mean, from a memory perspective, it's negligible, and from a CPU perspective, we have found that it's anywhere between 1 to 3%, depending upon the amount of data you're collecting and the kind of data you're collecting as well.
Thank you. And our last question comes from Colleen. Who do I contact if I have questions after I install Splunk?
Oh, good question. I'll go and take that one for you. If you can go over to the next slide, and by the way, as we wrap up here, because we're coming up to the top of the hour, if you have follow-up questions, there's a good contact email, and you can always get back to us. We'll be glad to talk to you. So you can try Splunk out today. I really like, and this is how customers get their hands on it and see the value. They can use the free version and start getting insights out of their data. Excuse me. So you can go out to our website and click on Try Splunk. It'll take you over to the download link and go ahead and install it on your desktop. We say that it runs from the desktop to the enterprise, and that's where customers start out solving issues there and then ultimately implement it. The other thing we offer, we've done this for quite a few customers, is the quick start. We help you out in getting started. Let's say you have a certain use case you want to solve. We'll help you get it installed, get the first of your several log files in, and extract that data, and you can start working with it. And so just send us an email, and we'd be glad to set that meeting up and be able to work with you. The other thing I want to just, if you go to the next slide as we wrap up here, and I want to thank everyone taking time out of their busy day to join us and just consider how Splunk can help start solving those data challenges that you have going on in IT operations. We are actually, as a follow-up to this session, we're going to be hosting 2 lunch and learns, and this is the first of the 2 on a schedule. And if you don't see your city there, let us know if you're interested, or a city that's close by. We're picking a lot of the major cities, and Nashville's the first one coming up, and then in May here in a couple weeks, and then Seattle the first part of June. And this is a chance to go ahead and come and meet some of the Splunk experts that will be with us. We'll get a chance to talk about your data challenges. There's some additional demos and just a chance to also have lunch too. So please join us for that. And also, if you have any questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to send us an email. And thanks for joining today.